CBSE Class 9 Political Science, Chapter 3 Constitutional Design. As the name suggests, the chapter Constitutional Design, it is divided into two words, Constitution and Design. In this chapter, some basic questions will be covered. What is a constitution? Why do we need a constitution? How are the constitutions drawn up? Who designs a constitution? What are the values imbibed in a constitution? And last but the foremost, once a constitution is accepted, then can changes be made in it later on or not, as required by the changing conditions? To begin with, finding the answers to all these questions, here we go. What is a constitution? There are certain basic rules that the citizens and the government have to follow. All such rules together are called constitution. As the supreme law of the country, the constitution determines the rights of citizens, the powers of the government, and how the government should function. In this chapter, we ask some basic questions about the constitutional design of a democracy. While finding the answers to these questions, we will come across one recent instance of designing constitution for a democratic state is that of the South Africa. We begin this chapter by looking at what happened there and how the South Africans went about this task of designing their constitution. Then we turn to how the Indian constitution was made, what its foundational values are, and how it provides a good framework for the conduct of citizens' life and that of the government. The next question is, why do we need a constitution? It reflects the ideals of the country. It defines the nature of a country's political system, whether monarchy or democratic. It provides guidelines to govern decision-making process in societies. It safeguards the citizens against the misuse of power by the leaders. Let's learn with the example of South Africa, which led to the making of democratic constitution in South Africa. Conditions in South Africa. Britishers rule. They came for trade purpose during the 17th and the 18th century. Britishers started living in their society and became the local rulers. They brought about changes, introduced the policy of apartheid. What was apartheid? System of racial discrimination which divided the people and labeled them on the basis of their skin color. The native people of South Africa were black in color. They made up about 3/4 of the population and were called blacks. Besides these two groups, there were people of mixed races who were called colored and people who migrated from India. Consequences of apartheid. The white rulers treated all non-whites as inferiors. The non-whites did not have voting rights. The apartheid system was particularly oppressive for the blacks. They were forbidden from living in the white areas. They were not allowed to use the facilities like trains, buses, hospitals, libraries, etc. They had separate churches. They were not allowed to make associations to protest. Struggle against apartheid. Since 1950, the blacks, colored, and Indians fought against the apartheid system. They launched protest marches and strikes. The African National Congress was the umbrella organization that led the struggle against the policies of segregation. This included many workers' unions and the Communist Party. Many sensitive whites also joined the African National Congress to oppose apartheid and played a leading role in the struggle. Several countries denounced apartheid as unjust and racist, but the white racist government continued to rule by detaining, torturing, and killing thousands of black and colored people. Results: the British government realized that the movement could not be suppressed and the blacks cannot be suppressed, hence changed the policy and gave them the right to be independent. The discriminating law was repealed. Nelson Mandela, the prominent leader of the African National Congress, protested against the policy of apartheid and was imprisoned in 1964. He was tried for treason by the white South African government. He spent the next 28 years in the South Africa's most dreaded prison, Robben Island. He was set free after 28 years in 1990. Mandela received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. He was elected the President of South Africa in 1994. Blacks became the majority and whites became the minorities. But confusion still prevailed. Towards a new constitution. Emergence of new democratic South Africa. They did not treat the whites in the same way. They were given an equal chance in the administration. They declared the country democratic. Both non-whites and whites came together to frame the constitution. Everybody was a part of the system irrespective of their past deeds. There was equality for all races, for men and women. They provided social justice for everyone. The Constitution came up, becoming one of the finest constitutions and inspiring the Democrats all around the world. It was called the Rainbow Nation. Why do we need the Constitution? Let us learn with the example of South Africa. The minority and majority were planning to live together. No trust factor prevailed. They wanted to safeguard their interests as they both had their fares. White minority wanted to guard its privileges and property. After negotiations, they agreed to a compromise. The whites compromised to majority rule, one person, one vote, whereas the blacks agreed to not let the majority be absolute and the white minority's property would not be taken away. But the question still prevailed: how to build the trust. They decided to write these rules and considered them supreme and that no government would be able to ignore them, and it was what was called as the Constitution. Why this was done? This was done so as to generate the degree of trust and coordination, to specify the powers and functions of the government, to limit or control the powers of the government, and to mention the rights of the citizens, to express the aspirations of the people about creating a good society. We have studied about making of the South African Constitution. Now let us study about the making of the Indian Constitution. The making of the Constitution for a huge and diverse country like India was not an easy affair. The people of India were emerging from the status of subjects to that of citizens. The country was born through a partition on the basis of religious differences. At least 10 lakh people were killed on both sides of the border in partition related violence. The British had left it to the rulers of the princely states to decide whether they wanted to merge with India or with Pakistan or remain independent. The merger of these princely states was difficult and an uncertain task. When the Constitution was being written, the makers of the Constitution had anxieties about the present and the future of the country.